Good morning. I'm doing these mornings now. I'm going to try and keep it mornings because if you're American, you're awake, which helps. If you're European, it's late, you're still awake. If I do it at the other end of my day, so it's 7:30 in the morning here, do it at the other end of my day, that's not great for a lot of folks in the US because they're asleep and it's first thing in the morning in Europe, which maybe isn't as much of a problem. But anyway, you like to try and be inclusive for everybody. Not too bad for the Aussies either. What are we? Yeah, it's 7:30. Christian's here. Good evening. I'm a bit earlier, see. Oh, you're on time, man. You're on time. Not much has happened since last week, has it? Holy Yeah, we'll get into that. We will definitely get into that. That one, even yesterday, some weird stuff with that, which we'll definitely talk about. G'day, James. Thanks for joining. So yeah, talk about things. New sponsor to talk about today. Automox, brand new sponsor on the blog. Worklets are a big toolbox of small bash and PowerShell scripts to automate and secure all your endpoints. Good week to be talking about securing endpoints, isn't it? Automox can automate any task on any endpoint. Plug and play IT automation for hundreds of use cases across Windows, Mac OS, and Linux endpoints, which is pretty much all the ones in the enterprise. Interestingly, I note they had a little bit in here related to CrowdStrike, and in particular related to finding your BitLocker keys and managing and provisioning BitLocker keys as well, from what I can gather, which was one of the interesting nuances of the week. It's like, can you boot? Can you boot into the disk which you encrypted so that other people didn't get your things? But if you're booting it into safe mode, you may need your BitLocker key. Anyway, Automox, good timing for them. Now, obviously, we didn't know what was going to happen in advance of this sponsorship, but I do think that was very fortuitous timing. So big thanks to Automox for their first sponsorship of TroyHunt.com. Oh, Kristen's waiting for 5 minutes. Okay, well, I did put the schedule on there. It was counting down. I am going to try and start doing these in a little bit more routine. In part for me as well, because it's just, routine is good when you're on your own. I want to say on my own. I have a wife. I have a wife and a business partner. But when you work for yourself, it's very, very easy for everything to become a blur. Yesterday, I was wandering around just not sure what to do with myself. I had done all of the most important things, and I'd been up since 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was wandering around going, there must be work to do. There must be work. And like there is, but I felt myself actually looking for work. And I walked right past the jet skis looking for work. I'm not going to do this today. I'm going to go out in the water. It's winter. It's 24 degrees Celsius we're heading for today. It's already 15. It's sunny. Yeah, I know. It's good. Where were we? What did I put on the list here? USA travels. Now this has been a while in the making. So I haven't been to the US since 2019, pre-COVID. And I was last there. I did a lot of US travel that year. I was in San Francisco, I was in Vegas, I was in New York a couple of times. I think I was other places, I can't recall. It was very busy. It's been a long time since I've been to the US. And there's a lot of various, everything from government agencies. Why am I getting text messages? Do not disturb. Government agencies through to private enterprises that we do a bunch of work with in the US. And there's just nothing like face-to-face. And I think there's a window of opportunity for Charlotte and I to have a few weeks of travel at the end of September into the start of October. So we are starting to line things up. I put out a tweet the other day and said, look, if there's anyone out there that wants to catch up, please ping me. I did this in 2018. In 2018, early in 2018, when Twitter was less controversial. I put out a tweet and said, I'm going to be in San Francisco. I've got some time free. If you work in a big, interesting tech company and you want me to come say good day, let me know. And I went into all of these really, really cool places. I think I can say them because I took photos in a bunch of them. But places like Twitter, Facebook, Uber, a bunch of others. I went to Okta, I think Riot Games, or did I do that in LA? I can't remember. Coinbase, many others I've since forgotten, but just cool people in there who's like, yeah, come and say good day. That would be really nice and have a chat. So I'm going to try and do the same thing this year, and it'll be a combination of stuff we're going to do in the northeast corner of the country, which tends to be more the government-y stuff, and the southwest corner of the country, which tends to be more of the tech folks. Now, I did hesitate at the idea of September, October in America. Because stuff got a little bit weird, like weirder than normal there at the moment. But maybe it would be interesting. At least it'll be Halloween as well, right? So, that's kind of fun in the US. Christian says, it is winter and 24 degrees. Here it is summer and 20, yeah. Well, Christian, I mean, we felt this coming back from Norway the other day. Well, of course, we were in Norway and then we went to Greece, and Greece was fine weather-wise. But we were hoping for this beautiful Norwegian summer, and we rarely saw anything over low 20s and quite a lot of rain as well. Our winters here are epic. But the cool thing is people look at that and they go, oh, your summers must be hell. No, because our summers are about low 30s. We don't get these 40-degree plus days that go on for ages like some of the other cities here and some of the other parts. I mean, we have parts of the country that are some of the hottest places on earth. But here, we're on the ocean, we get these low 30s. The only thing some people pick up on is like, oh, it's a bit more humid than what I'd like, but that's about it. So we don't get stinking hot days. It's warm during this time of year. It's awesome. Anyway, that's why we're going to go to Fiji next week. Quick pivot. So next week, I will do this video. I think I'll do this video at the same time. We are then going to go on a little holiday. Fiji is only a few hours from Australia. Never been before. It's kind of one of the last opportunities we can use to take L12 out of school for a week and not get in too much trouble for it, or not have it be too hard, because next year is high school. Some of you in different parts of the world might call it senior school. But as she makes that pivot, things just get a bit more serious. We've all been there. So we'll be away for a week, coming a week from now into somewhere even warmer and summery, and there will be awesome photos. I'll make sure I do that. Tradie Ches says, why not, Troy? Get on your jet ski. Nothing wrong with a wetsuit. Oh, well, we don't need a wetsuit. Trust me, I was out there, I think, on Sunday. Oh, so nice on Sunday. The ocean was flat. The waves were about 30 centimeters, and we just, a friend of mine and I, ripping up the ocean on the jet skis. I do wear wetsuit pants in winter and a top that I have to take off once it stops because I get too hot. That's our weather here. Now, speaking of Al, we did a radio interview this week. So Al came to Oslo with me, Charlotte and I, last month. And she did the 3D printing talk at NDC. Went fantastically. Was asked to speak on ABC Radio on the Gold Coast. I shared a tweet about this during the week. Went and did that on Tuesday. Very proud father. I thought she spoke really well. There's no hesitation. That's what I liked about it. No ums and ahs, just immediate responses. We took in some stuff. What have I got on my desk? We printed this one. This is pretty cool. This is like a dragon vase with a really cool sort of shiny filament, which I quite like. Now, this is so cool. There's also a multi-material version of this where it has 5 different colors. We are printing the MMU, multi-material unit version of this right now. It's on the printer. We're doing about twice the size. It's a print that takes about 3.5 days with 5,000 tool changes, they call it. So 5,000 changes of color. Every one of those changes is an opportunity for something to go wrong. So far, 0 interventions, as they say. So this is going to come out looking totally epic. It's going to be all black here with like red in the lava bits and red inside. Someone else colored it. We bought the model for like $5. We will then spend $50 on filament, but it's going to look awesome. And it's so cool. Every time I walk out here through my office, walk past the printer, and there's this thing just growing and growing and growing. Very cool. Other things I have on my desk at the moment. The hydroponics. I have tweeted about the hydroponics many times before, being probably the single coolest thing we've done that's actually been useful on this 3D printer. And we've created a hydroponics tower. There are free models online you can go and buy to get these. This is not quite the right part, but essentially imagine you get all of these stacked on top of each other, and where this little black lid is, you get a little bucket or a little basket that holds, they call it rock wool, which is like a little material that you can get different herbs and plants and things, wash all the dirt off, put it in there, whack it in here. You get a hose that goes up through the middle, fish tank pump on the bottom, a little shower head on the top, and it just drips all the way down through this tower. And we're growing all of this cool stuff. We've got all of these lettuce, the mint's going really well. The tomatoes look awesome. The tomato plant looks awesome. Hasn't created any fruit yet, but basil, rosemary, thyme, really, really cool. Anyway, our problem is when we went away to Europe for several weeks on the aforementioned trip, I did all of this work around having like a reserve tank because it only fits 20 litres of water in this bucket. And the plants were starting to drink a lot. You know, this shower's running, the roots are sucking it all up. Had this reserve bucket. I thought I had way more reserve than I needed. And through some very unfortunate circumstance, it must have sprung a leak. I don't know what happened. And we came home and everything was dead. So redoing this now. The reason I've printed this is that this one just here is a new mount. That's, which way do I want to do that? I must go, no, it goes that way. It goes in this one. This is a new mount where my plan, put a joint together like that, and then everything screws in, bolts. My plan is to find a 60-litre drum with a very firm top, and then I'll cut a hole in it that will go through there, and then this will get bolted to the top of the 60-litre drum, and now we'll have 60 litres in one container instead of 20 litres, and we will hopefully not kill the garden again. So today I need to go and find that. I printed the bits. Got to go and find it. G'day Wayne. Wayne's here. Gary says, hi Troy. My time listening to one of your shows. Are you pro crypto? Cryptography is important. Yes, I'm very, very pro cryptography, which is about encrypting our things and doesn't mean anything else unless the term has been abused to mean something completely different to what it was invented for. So yes, I'm pro crypto. Gary. Tradie Trev says, aquaponics is super cool if you want to add fish into the mix. We do have a big fish tank. It's built into this house, and it's massive. It's about 2 meters long. I want to say maybe 70 centimeters high. We've got a lot of fish there. It's the centerpiece of the room. I don't think I need to have more fish. I don't really know how the fish work. Charlotte has some idea, and then there's a guy who comes and keeps the fish alive every now and then. Yeah, I don't need more stuff to do. But good idea, good idea. Where's my list? So that's the USA stuff, 3D printing. Never ask for help with your mouse. Jeez, why did I do this? Why? Oh, why? Things on Twitter have been different of late, the last couple of years. A lot of people leaving Twitter because they don't like Elon, and then leaving Twitter because they don't like some of the, how do I say this without getting into more hot water? The tone has obviously changed. And I think what was happening before was that you had a tone that was, we're going to get back to American politics. I think it's just about impossible to talk about this without it coming back to that. The tone was very much the left side of politics, and the right side, a lot of stuff was not liked there. And a lot of that was either treated as hostile in responses or removed or other things. And then a lot of those people went off to other platforms where they became very centered by people with their own political views, which left Twitter with those people centered with their own political views. And then Elon came in, and as we know now from his support of Trump, he's obviously a lot more right-wing than the other side. So we've gone from very left-leaning to very right-leaning. And people seem to be oscillating backwards and forwards, trying to seek out the people with the same view as them, which I get, but then you just create echo chambers of the same views. So anyway, g'day Joe. Thanks for joining. So putting it delicately, how do we do that? A lot of really interesting people have then gone off to the likes of Mastodon. And then see, someone said to me something to me on Mastodon the other day, which just to me sort of illustrated the problem where, and particularly because what I see of American politics at the moment is largely what I see on YouTube. Like I don't watch normal TV here. I know I'm conscious that the YouTube will, again, echo the things that I find interesting. And I'm probably more left-leaning than right because that's the industry that we tend to be in. But where was this guy the other day? It's a perfect example. So someone on Mastodon was not happy about me not posting more there. What do you say? Said, wondering why people are still on Twitter. This includes sharing links. Also, people like Troy Hunt, who seem to only post automated stuff here. And I was like, oh, I'm going to show you. I'm going to post an actual personal reply. And I sort of said to this person, I don't just post automated stuff here, evidently, but a tiny size of my audience is here, and it tends to be very infosec-centric without broader diversity of tech community, among many other communities still on Twitter. So I just check in here occasionally. Now, to put it in empirical numbers, let's have a look. On Mastodon, I have 19,454 followers. On Twitter, and you're already going, yeah, but a lot of them are bots. We'll come back to that. Twitter, I have 236,800 followers. So there's almost 250,000 followers there on Twitter, well over 10 times the number. And a bunch of them inevitably are bots because this is what happens. I'm sure there's some on Mastodon that are bots as well. A bunch of them are probably accounts that people don't use anymore because I've been there since when? April 2008. But what I do find, the politics and everything aside, is that you tended to have a lot of InfoSec people go to Mastodon. Of course, it's federated. They can go to different Mastodon instances. I'm on infosec.exchange there. But it tends to be very InfoSec-centric people. And when I talk about 3D printing or home automation or things like that, those folks are over on the Twitter sphere. The journalists who are reading the things I write and then reaching out for comments and doing other things, which ultimately tie into my whole profession, they're definitely not on Mastodon. They're on Twitter. So regardless of your views of free speech and religion and sexuality and all the other stuff, which tends to get very, very heated on Twitter, and this is where part of the problem is. I have my views on that, and I suspect those views are mostly aligned with more the left-leaning people. But then trying to shut everyone else up whose views you don't like, whilst also saying that you want free speech, yes, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. This person says on Mastodon, you could make at least some of them move when you went away from Twitter. But why do I want to make them move? This is the point. You're saying I could make them move because you don't like the political views that are now more visible, not just political social views that are more right-leaning than they were before. And you won't get many followers here if you only post what you currently do. How many followers have you got, mate? Because I've got nearly 20,000 on Mastodon. Let's have a look. You've got 5. Oh, it's not even clear. Oh, no. Followers. 399. All right. Yeah, so, okay. All right. Enough said there. What was the other pointless man? He says, I like my living room clean, which I think is a way of saying he likes to be surrounded by people with the same views so that he's not exposed to views which he doesn't like. And this is part of what I lament with the US. Why am I going back there again? There are very polarizing views. It feels, from a distance, it just feels like two warring parties with these extreme different ends of views on religion and guns and life. And anyway, that's getting too deep for Friday morning. I hope you all just get along. It's politics, it's a democracy. This is what you wanted. This is how it works. Gary says, community notes is the best thing that's happened on X since Elon took over. I do think community notes are very good. I certainly in concept. I'm just really caught every time I read anything now. It doesn't matter which platform it is, or if it's on TV, like free to air or whatever. I just take everything with a grain of salt. I am so suspicious of every single thing I read now, including community notes. But I do think the concept of being able to provide some facts around a tweet, for example, is good. Ken says, always a treat to see a post from you on Mastodon. I do post that. Look, and I can post more, but as I said to this person, like it's not just Mastodon. There's obviously Threads, there's Blue Sky. And then if you really want to be inclusive of everything, there is, dare I say it, Truth Social. It's probably not my thing. Uh, there is Parler, there is Gab, there is all of it. There's Spoutable. Geez, let's not talk about Spoutable again. There are all of these other platforms, and I appreciate the desire for people who have picked one and gone to one to say, "Come on here, everybody." But everybody's already on this other one that I've been working on building an audience on for 16 years. So yes, you can see why. Tradie Tress is unlucky to check out all the social media platforms. Now, I started talking about social media because I tweeted about my mouse. Now, where I was going with all this is that for the most part, Twitter is a quieter place than what it was before. And I feel that that is to its detriment because normally I'd wake up each morning and there'd be dozens of interesting tweets to read. And I tend to just read the stuff that's at me, that's mentioned. Now, I understand this is maybe where my experience is different to others because a lot of people after Elon came in said, look, it's full of like hate speech. And, this again is a term that's used very, very broadly. And of course, there's a spectrum of things within there. But of course, they were seeing more things which, again, didn't necessarily align with their worldviews or frankly mine either. But they're seeing more of this stuff and jumping off. And I was getting up each morning and going through my ats, and it was just gradually diminishing. I wasn't really seeing the stuff they were seeing because I don't tend to read the public timeline. Twitter has been great for me for people to say, hey, Troy, have a look at this. And then a little bit like Facebook and all the other things, I'm just not that interested in all the general noise. Now, it was getting quieter until I tweeted about a mouse. Now, I have a sample mouse here in front of me. This is a Microsoft Surface Precision mouse. And I'm being very eloquent in the way I say that because it is a Microsoft Surface Microsoft Surface Precision mouse. This is not a Microsoft Surface, as you can evidently see. What I'm speaking on is not a Microsoft Surface. In fact, it is a Lenovo desktop. Let me just find the tweet. It's easier. This is a mouse that I have used in one variation or another for more than 20 years now. And as you can see, it is a little bit ergonomic. And in fact, if I pick my keyboard up and put that there, you'll see it's one of the ergonomic keyboards. Back in the early 2000s, now at this time, I'm in my 20s, which dates me. But the relevancy of it is I'm in my 20s, not long into a professional career, and I'm getting RSI. So I'm getting pain in particularly my right-handed, use the mouse. And I had a bunch of physio, and one of the things that they said is, you like get yourself set up now with ergonomic stuff, keyboard, mouse, chair, and posture and everything right. Go and do all of that. Now, this was before standing desks and things like that. So I did. And I've religiously, since that time, other than when I'm just working directly on a laptop, which is obviously not an ergonomic device at all, I've always had ergonomic keyboard and mouse. They've pretty much always been Microsoft ones. And each one of those will last some number of years until eventually it wears out. This keyboard, I think I've had at least 2 or 3 years. It's getting a little bit like I can't read some of the letters anymore because I've been typing so much, and it's getting a little bit grubby on the palm pad there. The mouse is pretty much fine. I noticed Charlotte has the same one for reasons I'll explain in a moment. Hers is actually starting to fall apart a little bit, but they get a lot of use. She has the same one as me because very often I will sit at her PC to show her something. So I went, let's have ThinkPads, keyboard layouts the same. Let's have the same keyboard and mouse, because if you've not used a keyboard and a mouse that is ergonomic before and you just use the normal, straight normal ones, and you go to the bendy one where you can get your hands in the right position, they feel super weird and it's very hard to go backwards and forwards between them. Somehow I manage when I go to the laptop because that's just like mental memory now. So I went, all right, we'll get the same for both of us. And then we got the same ones for the kids as well, because I want to get them off on the right foot of having ergonomic devices. So what we've ended up with is 4 mice and 4 keyboards that are identical, and anyone can go and sit at any computer and do stuff, and it's easy to use and it sets you on the right track in terms of ergonomics right from the beginning. Now, both the kids' mice started doing this weird thing where if you're on any screen, it doesn't have to be a browser, it can be any screen that scrolls, and you leave the mouse on there, it just starts jittering like that. The scroll starts jittering. And originally I saw this and I'm like, okay, well the obvious thing is it's dirty. So let's clean the optical lens, give it a bit of a blast of high pressure compressed air. Hasn't fixed it. Let's give it a little blast in here in the scroll wheel. Hasn't fixed it. Is it a Bluetooth issue? Let's remove it and repair it. All right, let's go full troubleshooting mode. Let's take my mouse that works fine and then plug it into a USB cable on their laptops and give it a go there. Everything's fine. And that's the other thing. There's a little USB port here. These are built-in non-removable batteries. Remember, Microsoft Precision Mice, one Google away and you can find out exactly how these things work. We'll get back to the Twitter thing. So you can power it via a wired connection, in which case it no longer is working over Bluetooth either. It then becomes a wired mouse. So once you plug a cable into it, you take out the variability of wireless and you also take out the variability of battery problems because obviously a USB cable is powered. And consistently, I could take my mouse and it works fine, plugging it into their machines, and I could take their mice and they didn't work at all. Well, they did the funny scrolling behavior on my laptop. So point is that we establish beyond reasonable doubt that it is a problem with the hardware on the mouse itself. Now, next thing, this is my mouse mat. I'm going to pick it up. It's massive, right? Like that's it. It's for those of you listening to this later on, it is, I think it's about 80 centimeters wide. And the reason I have it so wide is I sit my keyboard on there and I sit my mouse on there, and it protects this nice custom wooden desk I had made a couple of years ago. And of course it works just like a mouse mat should. It gives you really, really good optical feedback. This is a great mouse mat. It has no problems whatsoever. Remember that. I'm going to come back to some of the feedback. So all of that seems fine. Now I've tried to slice and dice this every single possible way I can. I cannot work it out. So I go to Twitter, which we have just been discussing. And I have a little video. I've said, what voodoo causes a mouse to do this? Same problem with two different Microsoft Surface mice in the house, regardless of machine. Two others we have a fine, regardless of machine. Clean thoroughly. What's left? Also does it when wired without Bluetooth, so don't think it's signal. This tweet has been seen 86,000 times. It has 269 replies to it. View post engagements. What are you getting the stats these days? I just see the responses. Now, I've had so many, let's be honest, stupid replies to this message. There are some good ones, but there are some really, really stupid ones. And we're going to talk about some of them because it's kind of fun. Before I do that, let's look at some of the responses here so I don't fall too far behind me. And I'm going to go down a rabbit hole when I start reading these responses over here. James says, I swear it didn't feel so polarized 10 or 15 years ago. I think you're talking about Twitter. I don't think Twitter felt polarized 10 or 15 years ago. I also don't I feel that a lot of the polarization began during the Trump presidency era. And I think a lot of it was because, I hope this is not too politically incorrect, but he said some stupid shit. And he said a lot of stupid shit. And there were, eventually, of course, he got banned from Twitter and then let back in later on. But there are things which are very left-leaning, which is what tends to be the case in the tech companies and in California and Silicon Valley. Left-leaning ownership did put a lot of controls around that speech. But I do feel that when I look at it now, if you work on the assumption that the US is a democracy and that there are two dominant parties and the country is fairly evenly split between them, let's assume that the last election was legitimate, which what do I know, I'm an Australian, but I think it was. You've got two very, very equally distributed parties within which I'm sure there are people on all ends of the spectrum of how seriously they take that party's mandates. But it is undeniable that the tech platforms out of Silicon Valley tend to be much more left-leaning, and the right-leaning folks are on the Parlers and the Gabs and the Truth Socials and things like this. So I agree with what you're saying, James, but I think the reason why it didn't feel so polarizing is that we had a lot more people around us that were more aligned with our views. And if we had gone and used another platform that was as popular, and of course there wasn't anything else as popular, and I don't think any of the others are either still, you'd see a very different set of views. And what I feel is happening is we're seeing a lot more of this mix together now. And there's a bunch of stuff in there I don't like. I'll be honest. So I'm fascinating reading some of it because it's just batshit stupid, but they are now there on that platform. So I think we see much more, we might say weird stuff, than what we did before, because now it is a more diverse audience. And even then, it's like obviously a lot of the stuff is the more left-leaning stuff is more about diversity and inclusion stuff. The more right-leaning stuff is less about that. But then ironically, when you say, well, look, let's have diversity of political views, it's like, no, I want this diversity, but I don't want that diversity, which is where the whole thing I just find gets really, really messy. Anyway, Ali says, Blue Sky and Discord is picking up. Twitter is getting worse, especially if you tweet about mice. Algo keeps promoting nonsense. Not political nonsense, just technically wrong info. I think, again, that is a question of how you use it. I find, let's roll the dice on this. If I go to home on my Twitter account here, what are the first things I see? I just, brutal. I do see, and again, I don't normally use it this way. I'm just looking at my mentions most of the time. I do see more stuff about randos just posting things that are sort of their own views. Like the first one here, who's this guy? No idea who this guy is. 80,000 odd followers. Content creator. Your guide to AI. AI-powered productivity hacks. Look at the brutal emails from the CEO of Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, and Facebook. And it's kind of that clickbaity sort of stuff. Historic vids I like. They're interesting. Gerald Ford, something there about that. A lot of videos. Maybe they just pop up the algorithm more because they get more views or something. That's a turtle climbing over someone's shoes. I don't know. That's just dogs. To be honest, like a lot of this isn't relevant to me in any way whatsoever, unless I go to following. And as soon as I go to following, what do I say if I go to following? All right, Corey House, someone I know from speaking days. He's interesting. Okay, there's something from the FBI here. I follow the FBI. Azure Cosmos DB, Apple Insider. That's all fine. SC Media. As soon as I go on to following, if I'm honest, what I see here is very similar to what I saw before. And I think it's very relevant. I do follow Elon. He's got something here about a breathtaking view of Earth from SpaceX. That's cool. Other stuff he's posted, I also think is a little batshit crazy. But this is the joy of a social media platform where you have an identity. And I've had people be very critical about me for posting non-InfoSec related stuff. I've literally written a blog post about people getting upset because I've posted about a car or a jet ski or beer or something like that. So anyway, I actually find that the following, rather, not for you, is a pretty good signal to noise ratio for me personally. We'll get back to that mouse in a second. Tradie Treader is a huge fan of wired MS IntelliMouse. Wired and rock solid design. I will say, other than the issue we're talking about, this has been rock solid. When the battery is flat, I've got a cable hanger around here. I plug it in. I use it with the cable for a little bit. An hour or two later, I unplug it, and I've got a clean desk for the next 2 months. And I have no issue with the wireless. And this evidently is not a wireless problem. James says, kids add jiggler feature. Yeah, now a few people did comment about the jiggler. In case you're unfamiliar with the term the jiggler, if you do not want a computer to go to sleep, you can get a jiggler. You can get like USB jigglers, which you put in a USB slot. It's observed as a mouse, and all it does is just moves the cursor, so the machine doesn't go to sleep. It's one of the things I've read about law enforcement using when they seize machines, just to ensure the machine doesn't go to sleep. They plug in the jiggler, and it just keeps the mouse going. It's also a good way to appear as though you're in front of the PC, even if you're not, which I have been told that some people might do in a place of work. Isn't it great that I've worked for myself for quite a while, but not before then? Anyway, moving on. James says, I meant US politics in general. Trump said all the quiet things out loud and stuff got crazy. It has gotten extra weird, hasn't it? You know? All right, look, I think the guy is obviously a bit crazy. The thing that's hard, I don't think anyone is like all crazy or all sensible. And what tends to get lost is when the sensible people who you think for the most part are balanced and sensible, when they say something crazy, often it gets lost unless the other party picks up on it. And when the people who seem a bit crazy say something sensible, you're so used to just hearing crazy stuff that you don't pay attention to sensible stuff. It's very hard. Ali says, CrowdStrike, you had good info, but then it was just a bunch of conspiracy theorists and posers. Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. We'll get to CrowdStrike. Meanwhile, good technical info found on WinAdmin's Discord and Blue Sky. I mean, the problem is with any information on any of these platforms, because it is user-contributed content, how do you trust it? I mean, okay, you start to create trust in individuals. I hope people usually trust what I say because I've got a reputation. But a lot of this stuff gets very, very viral very, very quickly, and it might be rubbish too. Gary says, do you use for you or following? Okay, I think we just had that discussion. I've answered that. Ali says, the people I was following are being shouted off the platform. People I'm not following show up in following all the time, e.g. Starlink. I think the difference there is that I will see in following, I will see some things that are promoted, and I guess just like I do on Facebook, and I kind of understand that, because if I spin back a little bit, like, okay, ProPublica. Why am I saying ProPublica? I'm sure I don't. Oh, I'm following. Why am I following that? Who is that? It shows how much I know. But there's a section here about who to follow, and all right, it suggests Bitwarden #1, or that's relevant, industry related. But I think even to the point about being shouted off the platform, what you're kind of saying is that there are people who are not liking what they're seeing and they decide to leave. You know, no one's forcing anyone to stay, no one's forcing anyone to go, and unless you're contravening whatever the terms of use is today, which of course is different to what it was 2 years ago anyway. Anyway, let's go on to the mouse. So here's some of the responses. Now, I was just flicking through. As I said, I use Twitter mostly just to look at the things that people at me on. And the number of responses I got to this that were just, like, you know, like some of them are good. Like this first one I see here in post engagement. Someone says, buy a different Bluetooth mouse in the store, see if it does the same. In doing so, you establish if it's the device or the PC. But the parent tweet did say that 2 of the other ones were fine. A bunch of people were just like, never Microsoft mouse, never Microsoft, never Microsoft, never Microsoft. Oh, you're always going to get that. I'm a Microsoft regional director. I don't work for them. I don't have a region. I don't direct anything. Making sense so far? I'm very honest about my feedback on them, and I really like these Microsoft keyboards. I'm sure Logitech have wonderful ones as well, and there are other brands that do good stuff too, but that's not really the issue. I've had so much reliability out of these for decades. I had other people say, Windows is your problem. You should get Linux. What? It's the hardware. Something in the hardware is jiggling, and it doesn't matter what the operating system is. If the device is sending jiggles when it shouldn't be jiggling, you're going to have that problem. What were the other replies? Let me just go back to the original tweet and scroll through these. We're not going to do them all because there's hundreds. A lot of people did say it was CrowdStrike, and I appreciate the humor in that. That was well-timed humor. Good one. Other people saying hardware or firmware. Now, I've not been able to find any way of updating firmware on these. I'm quite sure, though, that it is not a firmware thing. Someone somewhere here gave me instructions on how to take the ball out of the mouse. And I feel like even just saying that now, there are people listening to this who are like, what do you mean? The mice don't have a ball. It's a little like, mice used to have a ball. Careful how you say this. mice used to have a ball and there'd be a little cover on the bottom, and you'd rotate the cover and you'd pull the ball out. And the ball would run little, as you moved around, it would turn little wheels, one for the x-axis, one for the y-axis. And on a fairly frequent basis, you would have to take the ball out and you'd have to clean the layer of dust that would stick to the wheels because everything would start to get a bit jaggedy. No, this does not have a ball. And then multiple people saying it is your surface, get a mouse pad, when literally the photo is showing this great big mouse pad that I just showed you on the screen here. It is a wonderful mouse pad. No problems at all with the mouse pad. Like this one. Dude, put it on something else maybe. Piece of paper. Now, just to establish that it wasn't the surface, even if I picked the mouse up and I held it like this, upside down, with the laser, which is where the ball used to be, facing straight up to the ceiling, it would still jiggle. So no, it's not that. You know, I think some of these responses were good. Probably something with the scroll wheel. There's an IR sender receiver under the cover on both sides of the wheel. The wheel itself has spokes. If they become misaligned, they act weird. Yeah, which is fine. Try them on another OS or in the BIOS. Like, it's not the worst comment. Lots of people saying wireless device having interference. That is why I plugged it into the cable and it was fine, and why they still failed. And look, maybe some of this I just implied that obviously I've done the obvious things. Wireless interference, someone saying get a 10. Lots of people saying the way to fix this is just get another mouse, which is pretty much where we're going to end up, and I'll show you why in a moment. Lots of firmware discussions. Someone's saying like uninstall all the drivers. It's just, And then lots of people, oh, this one's from an account I muted. Why did I mute this person? Don't know. They must have done something stupid another time. Clear evidence of an ATP close operations team sat inside your house. Okay, well, that's kind of funny. So, because I was curious and because I could not get to the bottom of it, I did start to take the mouse apart. That's part of it. It's in my rubbish bin. And I wanted to see, first of all, if I could do it in a non-destructive manner, but the fact that I'm now pulling parts out of the rubbish bin probably gives you a hint as to how that worked out. I was trying to work out what exactly was, oh, here's the wheel, what exactly was happening. And if I could ever get it to the point where this little wheel here, which used to be mounted inside this little unit here that has the sensor, if I could non-destructively get to the bottom of it, but nothing I could do would settle it down. So yeah, I eventually get to the point where I just pull the whole thing apart. Never been able to figure out what happened. I've still got one that doesn't work. So now I've just got to make the decision, do I go and buy another couple of mice like this for the kids, or something a bit cheaper? Point is, Twitter's still very alive. I got a lot of rubbish responses. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of making the point that I think there's still a lot of useful information on there. Anyway, what else we got in here? Christian says, I wonder if there are anti-jiggle software to defeat anti-jiggle devices. An anti-jiggler jiggler? An anti-jiggle, I know what you mean. James says, I stay away from Twitter and Windows for the same reason. Too much promoted crap. I don't want to use Microsoft Edge or MS Online. I do find Edge is a very naggy browser. See, Microsoft Edge is great for downloading Chrome. Not an official Microsoft spokesperson. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you go to Edge and you Google with Bing and it says here's Chrome, you get these warnings the whole time about, have you tried Edge? There's all these reasons to try Edge. Like, I think diversity in the browser landscape is great. I like using Chrome. Please stop bugging me. Gary says, have you turned it off and on again? Yeah. No, yeah. Loads of times. Ali, Logitech MX Master 3S is a very nice high durable ergonomic mouse. Now, that was the one mouse that I did actually go and look up because I had lots of people mentioning that precise one, and it does look very good. Maybe we'll go and get those for the kids instead. I don't know. Alice says, on anti-jiggler software, I saw an article about a bunch of firings brought about by jiggler detection software. kind of like a bandwave. But you know what you need an I can't even get the acronym out. You need an AI powered jiggler that can emulate human behavior. There's a market there. You can have that one for free. Okay. 3/4 of an hour later, we haven't even got to CrowdStrike. Let's do CrowdStrike. Now, here's how my Friday went. At a very similar time to now, 1 week ago, I did this talk, did this video, this live stream. It's 8:15 in the morning here. I had an interview lined up to have a film crew here in my office to talk about the MediSecure incident, which is the Australian e-prescriptions provider got pwned, data being sold online, allegedly has been sold rather. Company is now under administration. They're bankrupt. It is a mess. Impacts nearly 12 million Aussies with their prescriptions and things like that in there. So it's an absolute fustercluck of a mess. That was the plan. And then I'm doing all my things during the day. I had the electrician over. We were doing a bunch of Ubiquity things, which was good fun. I'll talk about that another day. And I get to just after 2 o'clock Friday, and I get a call from one of our major news outlets here. And they're like, hey, like, have you heard, like, all our computers just gone like blue screen? And apparently it's happening to other media agents. And then while I'm talking, the phone's ringing with another number coming in. And within the space of 5 minutes, I had our 3 biggest different media outlets all calling, going, hey, we've got this thing happening. It's like, shit, really? Okay, well, that is interesting. I wasn't expecting that. And someone sent me a screen cap of what they're saying, and I started a tweet thread. Now, I'm going to read this because this, just by pure virtue of the time zone that I'm in and the fact that when I tweeted this was 3:24 p.m. So all this started going crazy at 2 something in the afternoon. 3:42 p.m. I tweeted this photo and I said something super weird happening right now. Just been called by several totally different media outlets in the last few minutes, all with Windows machines suddenly BSODing, blue screen of death. Anyone else seen this? Seems to be entering recovery mode. 10.9 million views on that tweet. Oh, that's a good tweet. That's a good engagement there. A lot of good engagement on Twitter, just saying. I was awake. That was what I did right on Friday. I wasn't sleeping at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now at that time of day, it was very early morning in Europe, and it was the middle of the night in the US. So we managed to get hit by this in Australia on a Friday arvo when everyone was still at work, planning their weekend, and that allowed me to get a good jump on sharing information about this. Now, of course, by now, everyone knows what happened and why it happened. But at that time, it was just really, really odd. And then we started hearing things about CrowdStrike very early on. And I just kept going on this tweet thread, quoting other people. Airports were down, things like that. Different parts of the world that had the same thing happening. And interestingly, as soon as I got called about it, and of course, people called me because they're like, well, is it a cybersecurity thing? Which it kind of was indirectly, but not malicious. The interesting thing that popped out to me is that if it was one company and they'd all gone blue screen, I'm thinking like Sony Pictures. Remember Sony Pictures when they got done by Guardians of Peace? And everyone came into the office and every screen had like this Guardians of Peace stuff on the screens. That's one thing, because it only happened to Sony Pictures. Hat tip to DPRK. When it's different companies, totally independent companies, even though they might be in the same segment, being media, and they're all seeing the same thing at once, that doesn't sound like cyber attack. That sounds like some common thread, namely the operating system here, where something has come undone. So I'm going through sharing stuff here, and it's becoming evident what has happened. And there are 2 tweets I had, which then just got quoted all over the world. And I was getting friends and family in different countries like sending me photos in the newspaper with my name on the front page, which was kind of cool. But where were the 2 things here? Anyway, I remember what they were. So one of them was, I said, look, this will almost certainly be the largest IT outage that we've ever seen in history, which I think is safe to say now it was. And the other one was, this is what we were all worried about with Y2K. Now, I don't know where all of you were at Y2K. Some of you might not have even been born. Anyway, I was in the first decade of my career, And I remember while I was working in London at the time, and the amount of work we did in the lead up to Y2K, I was working at a bank, the amount of work we did in the lead up to make sure we didn't have problems. And then, of course, Jan 1 rolls over and basically nothing happened. But this is what we were so worried about happening. It's just like mass outages all of a sudden. Now, fortunately, the fix for this has, for the most part, been easier than what we're worried about with Y2K. But, you know, maybe all of the work we put in advance kind of made a difference too. I'm going to keep going on CrowdStrike. Let's read some of the comments here. Gary says, my previous employer, local government, locked the USB, still on mouse jigglers here, locked the USB port down. And if you want to plug something, they have to unlock the USB for the device driver for that product. Yeah, it used to be a thing where people would like literally glue USB ports shut because they're worried about, for example, people bringing in USB sticks and exfiltrating data. Now we just exfiltrate to the cloud. It's much easier. Neil, have you tried streaming to X at the same time as YouTube? They seem to support video more these days. If it was possible to stream to both, I'm not sure it is. Yeah, I'd give that a go. If someone knows how to do that, let me know. Jane says, my sister-in-law didn't have a bank account for a couple of days and I couldn't order groceries online. I'm glad I keep a backup payment method, usually cash. Yes, well, so let's start to talk about that, the things that actually happened. And I started to add these to the thread, but we're Friday afternoon. We had people coming around for dinner at 6 o'clock. I had been cooking pulled pork all day. It smelled delicious. I wanted to focus on our guests. Interestingly, one of who is also in the tech space. So we had many interesting discussions about this. What the hell was that? Very loud car. Who has a loud car these days, really? Anyway, so lots of tweets I started adding into this thread. And of course, what we now know is that it impacted everything from airlines to grocery stores, the checkout counters, lots of interesting photos of BSODs in places that you just don't normally see BSODs, you know, like big billboards. Obviously trying to pay for your groceries, some really interesting videos. And I feel like I'm telling people stuff they already know. So I think we'll get on to some of the more insightful stuff in a moment. But interesting videos of people like walking around their office and just like every screen is blue. And I do feel like we just got a bit of a glimpse of how bad could stuff be. You know, this ultimately, this was the worst we'd seen, no doubt. But ultimately, this wasn't anywhere near as bad as what it could have been because the recovery process, simple. You've got to go and do it on every single machine and you've got to do it with physical presence, but it's simple. And I think probably the simplest way is Microsoft ended up releasing a bootable image, chuck it on a USB stick, boot to USB. You might have to change your BIOS to actually allow you to boot from USB, but yeah, what's that, a couple of minutes? You do that, boot to USB, removes the flaky file, you're back up and running, all good to go. The nuances, as we touched on before, BitLocker. So do you have your private key for BitLocker? A lot of organizations might have struggled with that. And again, this is sort of part of the problem of we want to have all this encryption and do everything in secure ways where we have encryption at rest. But that, again, goes back to this week's sponsor, Automox, help you manage your BitLocker encryption keys. So I guess the point is that the recovery process wasn't hard so long as you have IT support people. I would suspect that for the masses, you would not be getting them to go through and boot from USB and run the image and restore back to a good state. I say this, I have been through this before. I'm trying to remember which incident it was, but one of the viruses that just went everywhere when I was at Pfizer, I recall a time where we had to shut down every machine on site. Every machine got shut down, network cable pulled out of every machine, and then us IT folks have to go around with USB sticks, booting up and installing whatever patch it was that was due at the time. And this is what often happens in a case like this. You end up with poor old IT folks being mobilized and running the patches everywhere. Assuming the BitLocker issue wasn't a problem, your issue then is how do you get people around to every machine to restore to good state? Well, if you're, let's say you're a bank in the CBD in Sydney, it's like, all right, no problems. You've got on-site support staff. It was a Friday arvo, at least here. That's their weekend done. They're just going to go through and get everything up and running for Monday. But what about organizations that have satellite offices? So they might have satellite offices that have small numbers of staff. Let's say it's Avis, or Hertz or Budget or a car rental place. Offices all over the place. If they're running CrowdStrike in these instances, then it's hard to get people around to all those different places. And also, how are you going to send them instructions to go and create a bootable USB disk if that's the path you're going to take? Their machines are down. That won't start. Maybe you can send a message to their iPhone, but then you can't create the bootable image. So I think what we'll see is that it's almost like everything went to hell, recovered very quickly, but now there's going to be like a long tail for everything to get back up to speed. I found the numbers interesting. When I was doing media on this, and I did a huge amount of press, again, because I managed to get there early on this tweet thread, I said, I think what we're going to see out of this is millions of machines impacted. And the number that we've subsequently seen from Microsoft is 8.5 million. 8.5 million machines is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the Windows install base. It's about 1%, apparently, of the Windows install base. All of this drama was from 1% of PCs having an issue. Now, of course, it's 1% because it's only going to be organizations running CrowdStrike. Now, when we say organizations running CrowdStrike, their Falcon EDR product is not something that the mums and dads use. So immediately, your entire slice of the audience that is just running native Windows and let's say they're running Microsoft Defender, probably not running Kaspersky, running Microsoft Defender, all of those are out of scope. They all got spared. And then of the remaining organizations, there are many EDR products out there. You're left with just the ones running CrowdStrike. So I guess the point I'm making is that this much chaos was caused by a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the install base getting blue. I tried to combine blue screened and B-sodded. You know what I mean? It didn't work. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny slice of the audience. What if it was the same glitch pushed out by a Windows update, simultaneously hitting everyone? What would happen then? Now, lots of questions came up from the media and the masses in general. So questions such as, let's just start with the most stupid ones and then come to the more rational ones. Someone the other day was saying, well, really, they should only be pushing updates out on a Tuesday. It'll be a patch Tuesday like it was with Windows, and then everyone gets to test beforehand. I just remember saying to the person, why don't we just ask the hackers to wait until a Tuesday to release their new variations of malware? That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Because this is the problem with EDR/AV, is that it is meant to respond quickly to emerging threats so that you don't get your data ransomed. Not just locked up, but exfiltrated and centralized, because this is what ransomware is now. It's encrypt your things and also send your things off to an external party so that it can be held for ransom. The idea of waiting any amount of time doesn't reconcile with the risk that we're trying to address here. And it's just the same way people said, well, maybe don't push it to the entire world at once. Stage it. Okay, who do you want to remain at the most risk the longest? I'm in Australia. Let's get it in Australia first. We can be the crash test dummies. So when there's that next self-propagating worm that's going through and doing huge damage to machines, we get protected first, you guys last, because we're the crash test dummies. And I mean, another question that came up a lot from the media, they'd be like, how likely is this to happen? It's like, well, it's 2024. We really haven't seen anything on this scale before. There are precedents. Apparently McAfee had a precedent before, but obviously nothing like this scale. So I would say the likelihood is extraordinarily rare. It's not that likely, is it? The impact, of course, is very high, but the likelihood is very low. Now, it does appear that these channel files, as CrowdStrike has referred to them as, are pushed out multiple times every day. And within these channel files are new defenses against emerging threats. And my understanding is it's not just like virus definitions, but there is code that gets pushed out, and of course code that runs at kernel level. Part of the remit of AV EDR is to be able to operate in the space where the nasty things might be operating. And as I said to many journos, it's one thing if you get a bad update for Photoshop and then Photoshop no longer works. Your computer still boots, you can still do Microsoft Word, but your Photoshop doesn't work. And then you have to restore your Photoshop. But Photoshop runs within a sandbox space. The whole idea is that when you keep taking updates from Adobe, it can't break out of that space and start to do things at, say, the kernel level. The idea of antivirus is that we need to be able to operate where the bad things are. So it needs to have such low-level access that it can get into those things. Now that brings up one of the interesting points. I'll just see if I can find an article about it so I can just read it and be objective. Microsoft has been a bit unhappy. Here's a headline. Let's just go through to the story here. Microsoft blames EU rules for allowing world's biggest IT outage to happen. And, you know, their position here is that an EU ruling in 2009 required them to allow AV vendors to operate in that kernel space, I understand, for anti-competitive reasons, so that it wasn't just Microsoft that owned the whole AV space. You know, CrowdStrike could come along and build a product that could do the same thing. And immediately when I was reading this, I was like, this feels very, very much like the current Apple situation with the App Store, where Apple's like, look, we don't want to introduce security problems. EU is like, well, you can't be a monopolistic empire. You need to be able to let other people play in the same space you do. And I think this is a really good example of where we can see both sides to that. Being able to operate in a privileged space introduces risks that wouldn't be there were that not possible. Having massive monopolies to the exclusion of everyone else creates other problems that we don't want to have. And I'm sure this will be used as a precedent for many, many years to come as to why opening up that access, even for anti-competitive reasons, does create more risks that weren't there before as well. Now, while we're just talking about the various things that came up, one of the topics that came up over and over and over again was this term, the Microsoft outage. It's like, it's not the Microsoft outage. And I generally dislike these IRL analogies because I think they're all really bad, but it's a little bit like saying, yeah, I went and got tires for my Tesla and the tires had a problem. It's a Tesla outage. It's like, no, it's not. It's something that is running on the Tesla that has the problems. So clearly it wasn't a Microsoft outage, but that was the headlines that we saw over and over again. Let me look at some of the comments because I want to finish with one of the more funny things that happened yesterday. What else have we got in here? McBunny Brown says, we're basically giving root access to every production server to a third party outside your org. And that's the value proposition. And obviously CrowdStrike is very, very successful. I mean, they were valued, I don't know if it was before the drop on Monday or not, but they're valued at like $85 billion US or something. Like it's an extraordinarily successful company. Neil says, my partner's laptop had BitLocker. We could get the key from AAD, but then she didn't have local admin to change system files. Ended up rebooting 11 times until it righted itself with newer patch. How many times do we joke? It's like, just reboot it. Sometimes you just need to reboot it 11 times and it comes good. Richard says, imagine if it had been a standard Microsoft AV and not enterprise level stuff. Yeah, and this is really the point. Like, what if it had been something that wasn't 1% of machines, but let's say it was 10% of machines, let alone a much higher number altogether. Joe says, I work in IT support and the spectrum of issues was interesting. Some devices booted straight into safe mode, 2 minutes downtime, while others got stuck in a loop and needed the bootable USB. And this is where I think that long tail will be as well, because there's always going to be odd edge cases too. I guess one of the things that's kind of interesting now, when we think about the possible outcomes of this, let's say there was total loss of the data on the machine, which might be the case if you don't have a BitLocker key. We're now in an era where saving to cloud is so ubiquitous. For example, if you're using Microsoft OneDrive, it's always saving to cloud. We're sort of in an era now where we can just start to blitz a machine, put a new machine in and not have data loss, and also have very minimal downtime, which I think is pretty cool. Like it's a good state to be in when we think about this situation. And certainly one of the things that came up a lot in the interviews I did was reporters, etc., be like, well, what should organizations take away from this? And I said, well, yeah, I think one of the big things is, in your business continuity planning, how many organizations have planned for just simply not having machines available? What do you do when you don't have the machine available? Now, some businesses, I think, just simply will not be able to operate because their entire checkout system is done on a Windows machine, for example. Other organizations, I mean, if they're flight boards at an airline, there must be fallback positions from that. Can you not broadcast the data on the board from another machine, for example? So I think it's going to cause a lot of organizations to think about, how do we continue operating a business when there is a complete outage at the operating system level? It's an interesting discussion, and I think that discussion caters for not just a future incident like this one, but bad patches from Microsoft, hardware-related failures that suddenly happen en masse, just all these weird, unexpected things that none of us can see coming yet. Joe says, I read, unverified, that the CEO of CrowdStrike worked at McAfee when they had their moment in the sun. Very unfortunate. I'm pretty sure that is verified, actually, Joe. That is very unfortunate. I think the thing to remember too, it's very often the person at the top of the chain that ends up wearing it, such as, was it the person who ran the Secret Service who then got the boot after the assassination attempt the other day? But that sort of thing. Now, it's obviously not their hands at the keyboard, and there's a question of how much of what happened is due to their reign and the processes they put in place. I don't know. That might just be a really unfortunate coincidence for the guy. Ali says, CrowdStrike had similar failures on various Linux distros in the past couple of months on Falcon EDR. I had read that as well. So they're going to be asking a lot of questions, aren't they, internally? And they're not the only ones who are going to be asking a lot of questions. It is, of course, going to be the organizations that were hit with this. You can smell the lawsuits already, can't you? And it is going to be governments that are asking the questions as well. This certainly led to a lot of attention from our government. We've got a government that is very focused on cybersecurity lately, after all the incidents we've had lately. So we saw our Minister for Cybersecurity, Claire O'Neill, talking publicly about the CrowdStrike incident. And it does have a national impact, not just on security, but on the simple mechanics of how the country runs. If all the trains suddenly stop and a bunch of the flights are cancelled, that has really serious impact. Bonnie Brown says, Brendan Gregg posted an article about how CrowdStrike EDR uses eBPF on Linux, so cannot crash the kernel like it did on Windows. Which, of course, it's like my stupid mouse issue. You get a lot of people pop up and go, well, this is why you shouldn't use Windows, as though somehow that fixes the problem. Now, Mark says, this is a good point. It didn't help that Microsoft had their own service outage earlier in the day. Now, I wasn't actually aware of this at the time because it didn't impact me or any of the Have I Been Pwned bits. But it looks like there was some Azure outage during the day. It appears to be unrelated. It happened hours earlier. Obviously, CrowdStrike simultaneously pushed that channel file out to every single connected machine. There's no evidence that any outage before that point in time where it hit everyone at the same time was due to the CrowdStrike situation. But look, obviously it was a pretty minor Microsoft outage in the scheme of things, certainly compared to the CrowdStrike incident, and apparently completely unrelated. James says, cloud backup is great until the machine messed up, run the internet too. I wonder what if it affected 1% of Linux devices. I think what you're saying is if the machine messed up, run the internet. Are you saying that if you lose your internet access? Anyway, obviously, yes, you need internet access to your cloud things. And Ali says, just having the right group comms to fall back on is a good start. The Optus outage was very funny for that. It's a little bit like when organizations have data breaches, and I'm like, why haven't you notified everyone yet? And I've heard on multiple occasions, we literally don't know how to send that many emails. Like, it could be tens or even hundreds of millions of emails. Is your organization in a position where you can do that? And this is something that requires preparation. One of the data breaches, I'm trying to remember which data breach it was. There was one, I remember it was a US company, as a well-known name. I can't remember. It happened right on Thanksgiving in the US, and I just remember speaking to the CTO on his Thanksgiving, probably interrupting his turkey somewhere. And they managed to get all their notifications and things out in less than 24 hours. And later on, I sort of said, how did you do this so well? And he's like, well, we practiced it. Oh, that seems like a good idea. Why don't more companies do that? Now, the last thing on this, which I think was kind of funny, 99% of everyone else thought was kind of funny. One person didn't think so funny. I'm going to read you the message they sent me because I think their response was funny. Let's just read it. I'll just read the tweet. So the TechCrunch article here says CrowdStrike offers a $10 apology gift card to say sorry for outage. And it turns out that they have sent $10 Uber Eats gift cards to a bunch of partners that had to deal with the issue. I assume it wasn't just like $10 for the entire partner, but $10 for each individual. And I've tweeted this and I've said, nothing says we're sorry for knocking a significant portion of the world offline and causing global mayhem like a $10 Uber Eats voucher. Facepalm. And everyone sort of responds to this and is like, that was just such a dumb gesture. Now, I was trying to find, I was asking the ChatGPT about this, maybe someone knows the term. There is a term or a conundrum or a paradigm or whatever it is, which is when something of a monetary value is given to someone in return for something that they have done, for example, a partner who's been supporting the CrowdStrike outage, when that gesture is made, if that gesture is made with something of value that is completely incommensurate to the related issue, it is worse than doing nothing at all. And I'll give you an example about this, personal example. I used to proxy a lot of mobile app traffic, and I would look at communications, and usually that would be mobile apps running over HTTPS. You would install a root certificate on your... How exactly did I do this? I've done this for years. I'd use Fiddler, install the Fiddler root certificate. Fiddler would be an intermediary. It would issue its own certificate for bank.com. You would trust the root certificate on your device so you could then sit in the middle of the traffic. Bottom line is that it required compromising your own device to trust a certificate which was not a valid one issued by a valid CA. Now, I found that one of our major banks wasn't doing certificate validation. Now, if you don't do certificate validation, if you turn that off, you effectively entirely invalidate your entire transport layer encryption, because someone can sit in the middle of the communication, intercept the traffic, re-encrypt it with their own self-signed certificate, which should never be trusted on a mobile device, but because they'd turned off certificate validation, it would go through. This was a major, major shortcoming to remove all the encryption on the transport layer from a bank. So I reported this with no expectation of anything. And I would have been happy if they came back and went, hey man, thanks so much for this. We fixed it. Really appreciate you disclosing this privately. And they did do that. And then they gave me 2 movie tickets. Not like the gold class good seats either, 2 of the cheapest movie tickets you could get. And I subsequently got a lot of mileage out of that story because it was like, a thank you would have been nice, but when you went, we thought it was this valuable, that's when it's like, nah, that's just stupid. And that's the problem here. And we can see it in all the replies here. When people are like, I can't even get a meal for $10. It's like, $10 is all your effort to bring systems back to life is worth. CrowdStrike. Yeah, and everyone is just like, this is insulting, this is stupid. Everyone, except for the person from the brand new Twitter account that they just created, who sent me this DM. I won't give you the name of the account. Has this person even tweeted publicly? Because obviously someone who doesn't want, no, 1 following, 0 followers. All right. Here's what this person says. I was going to reply, and then I was like, no, you just get nowhere. But I'll talk about it here. Little bit of integrity would be nice, big fella. The Uber Eats tweet is a bit much even for you. CrowdStrike sent out the voucher to partners, orgs who sell CrowdStrike to end clients, as they are helping with the responses as a thanks. It wasn't sent to end users or clients as a sorry. How tone deaf are you, mate? Like that's... and the reply I started to write and then realized there's no point getting into an argument with the person. Who knows if it was a guy or a girl. The one I started to write was like, just read the responses. Like read, not just to my tweet, because you could argue that my tweet implied that this was a sorry to customers, but just read the internet. There is no one going, yeah, that seems reasonable. Like no one said that. Everyone was like, this is so tone deaf, stupid. So random nameless person who didn't even have the guts to do this under their own identity. Yeah, you're wrong. File that away. So good comments. Neil, congrats on your MVP award number 14. Yeah, we can talk about that really briefly because it was on the list. I got my 14th MVP award. It was last week, actually. I meant to write something about it then. Some stuff happened between then and now, which kept me distracted. I got my first MVP award. I still remember exactly where I was and when it was. It was the 1st of April, which did make me think twice. And I had just flown back from somewhere. I was still working for Pfizer. And I remember landing in Sydney and turning on my phone and getting this email going, 1st of April 2011, I've got this MVP award. And I was shocked and stunned because I had always held that in such high regard. And for those of you not familiar with this, this is Microsoft's Most Valuable Professional Award. I think from memory, there are like 2,500, 3,000 people around the world who get this award each year. It is for community contributions and technical specialty in a particular area. There are Xbox MVPs and Microsoft Excel MVPs. Mine was for developer security. I think I now fit into like developer tools and so on. You get no money from it. You get a nice recognition. You get a bunch of access to Microsoft products and some partners. JetBrains, for example, I use ReSharper in Visual Studio. So it's very much like an industry recognition. Separate completely to the Microsoft Regional Director, which is something I've had, I think, since about 2017. That tends to be folks who are less focused on one technology, but might have a broader view of things, particularly those working at high levels of big organizations and governments and things like that. So I still have that going, and I think there's 100-something regional directors around the world. As I said earlier, don't have a region, don't direct anything, but do have a cool title. Yeah, so thank you, Neil, for the recognition there. That was really cool. And as I said in the blog post associated to it, the reason I have that is because I have audiences like what I'm speaking to at the moment that are interested in consuming the things I do. And the MVP award was something I got very early in my independent career. I'd been working professionally since 97. Geez, dates me. But my independent career was really sort of taking off around that era, and that made a massive difference. So to keep having that is just a really, really nice little recognition thing. Anything more here on the comments here? Ali says this is in relation to the DM. I'm guessing this is the CEO whose comms have been atrocious. I honestly haven't seen any more of the CEO's comms, unless this was him, since that very first one. I think he did a video there where this guy is having the worst day of his professional career. I think I said that somewhere publicly too, and I'm sympathetic to him for that. I certainly have no ill will against CrowdStrike. I would have expected, to be honest, a week later, we would have had a detailed post-mortem by now. As far as I know, that hasn't happened. If it has happened, and if that was the CEO who DM'd me and you're watching this now, as a contact, just send me an email. You could have sent me an email. If it was, in fact, if it was anyone from CrowdStrike, you could have said, hey, look, just saw your tweet. Just in case you're not aware, this is not something that we gave to customers as compensation. This is what we did to partners. It'd be awesome if you could just clarify that. And I would have gone, yeah, that seems reasonable. But when you go anonymous so that I don't know who you are, and then you refer to me as big fella, and the tweet is a bit much, even for me, it's not even worth asking what that means. That's just dumb. And maybe it was someone from CrowdStrike, because I have done one or two dumb things lately. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for watching. I'll come to you probably same time next week before I head off on that trip. James, last thing, James says, he looked terrible, couldn't speak. I figured it was 12 pots of coffee in 2 days in there. Yeah, I mean, again, I think the guy can be cut a little bit of slack because it was obviously a very, very difficult time for him. Let's see if we have a good postmortem to talk about next week. See you then.